with a little update on what they've been up to.
Yeah, of course. Now we have these guys using the Mammoth pistol to their advantage. And we can see Nebs with it in his inventory right now. We've seen how much destruction this pistol can cause. And it's right here we see Nebs getting a huge tag onto Janice that then Hellfire can go in and clean up that elimination. That's going to be huge for this team for both their Storm Surge and, of course, their loot. And that's why we're seeing them high above Storm Surge at the moment. They do get tagged up by themselves, but, of course, they are able to capture this combat cash as well. So their loot's bolster going into endgame, and is their surge. They're looking good.
Looking good indeed, Minnie. Thank you for breaking that one down and really showing not only the offensive end of the Mammoth, but showing the duality overall. You peak just a little too long. You try to rotate. You go from having fun to not having much, trying to heal up. And you're seeing, again, double Mammoth pistol as well due to its high damage output, even for a body shot. Two well-placed shots, just like you saw Act Force and Robon do very, very early on. You saw Nebs do it as well. It is going to be an instant down. Somebody's game is going to get ruined.
Look at this. Maybe they are going to be back to their aggressive ways. If they ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. Ooh, what a shot there.
Wow. Wow. It's really showing the dominance. We got Hide on Bush. And the newest member of Monaco. Got Merstash here. 1,000 above the threshold. They're looking to basically clinch their grand final spot here this week with a top placement on the day. Try to make it smooth sailing for week number 3. You want to get it right out of the gates early on. 33 teams still left alive. 8 teams need to go down before placement points even begin to set in, which is not much of a difference between the teams right here in game number 1. But as the day goes on, if you go down in 26 before those cascading points begin to accumulate, that is what is going to really kind of start to do mental things to you even. You have to stretch your plays, get a little greedy, go for eliminations when it might not be the case in most situations. Ooh. Always catches my attention here.
You can see them just trying to cut to zone now, white lining their way through. The shrubs will provide a bit of cover from the left and right, but ultimately not much to be done there, just trying to get to zone. Robon with a smile on his face, led all players with 20 eliminations in week 1 finals. Was astounding in his efforts to do so. Who knows what he can do now with that Mammoth pistol as well.
Oh
no. Oof. Almost.
I don't know if that player felt how lucky he just got by both of them missing those shots. I don't know, it was a quick happy feet movement towards the end. But man, we just saw something close to disaster striking. 110 above the damage threshold here for Spinaldo. In Crazy World, they have to keep on their toes looking for the damage. They spot a team into the distance, waiting patiently for them to peek. Interesting enough that they're not trying to use the Mammoth in this situation. At least 80 damage nonetheless, so a good amount of accumulation towards their Storm Surge total. So for Spinaldo and Crazy World, they just need to keep on what they're doing.
Kiri and Pink struggling a bit to get in. You can see makeshift builds to try and provide some sort of an avenue to get in, but even then they've taken a chunk of damages along the way. And here on the congested side, very much going to be a struggle to get much room to breathe. Finally, Pink able to get there, and they can find a bit of solace, but this is going to be another tough rotation for them to make.
Yeah, you can already see and even hear a lot of the damage being dealt, not only to the teams around them, but the teams straight in front of them. And they got some elevation to overcome, but they can also use the natural plateaus there as cover. Try to get from point A to point B, but it's not going to be the easiest journey. Daisy and Podesai, they're doing good up until this point. 4 eliminations. They're really good on mats. 2 slurp juices and 5 different slap splashes. So for them, their only worry is to quickly hop in towards the zone, get themselves a good position. And you can see they're trying to go as deep as possible. You can see the other half of the zone. There's nobody there. So if you can make it to that side, you will be on the least congested side of the map, and you can make and plan your rotates much easier from there on out.
What do we have here? Hide on Bush Mustache. Very much good on Surge, and that's much better to see from them compared to what we saw at times last week. Couldn't really seem to get a grip on things, and that's not what you expect from Hide on Bush, one of the best players ever, one of the best IGLs in the game. But clearly starting to get a better idea of things, and I think as long as Mustache is in line and being kept in check, there's always a good chance these guys can win in any given moment.
See how congested one side of the map is massively compared to the other. It's almost like you draw a line right down the middle, and they're choosing to be on the eastern edge. 147. They're continuously trying to pick up some shots in it, and Razumi, they have the high ground for now, but they get a far pull. So holding on to it might not be the play for them. They quickly use their slap splashes, and they're trying to move to the zone as quick as possible. They're trying to be one of the first teams there, and you see the natural elevation there. They could try to claim the high ground as their own, but they go ahead. They're taken down. Show laughing. And another one. There goes the first knock. Show them's going to go down. They're laughing. He's trying to get out of the box. He's just stuck between a rock and a hard place, and he has to be able to get out of this quick because the rest of the lobby is on their way there.
He didn't even see it coming, show them. Synod literally used the grind vine to just dunk on his head. He didn't see a thing. Nice and easy, quickly done. That's why you always got to stay on your toes, always got to be alert. You don't see that often. Janice and Reason, we know they didn't actually make it through to the weekly final in week 1, so very much need these last 2 weeks to be top performances. Otherwise, there's a good chance we won't be seeing them in the grand final.
This is a good game number 1 for them, though, because they already went down. We saw Janice get eliminated. He's back into the game, trying to make up for what you even said yourself, lost time and a lost opportunity in week number 1. Week number 2 here is so crucial with so many teams displaced out of their usual placement on that last week as Axe Force with the Breacher and the Mammoth. Call him long range because he's ready to deal damage. 1,300 above the threshold. Him and Robon right now have full control over the high ground, and it's up to them if they want to hold on to it or if they make a mistake.
Yeah, it's not a bad spot to be in by any means. They've got to be careful of those teams on second height, though. For the sign, Snazy very much in a strong position. Snazy's been on a tear already so far this game, and they've added another one to the tally, 6 so far.
Trying to find even more, but you don't necessarily have to look for it. If you look at the resources, they are almost max mats, as some would say, compared to most here in this lobby. You can see him tunneling forward, looking towards the backside of zone. The chance to steal away high ground is now or never for some, as Seti and Cammy. They're one of those teams that they're okay with the low ground. They're okay with just bypassing the usuals for a lot of these teams and just playing their own game, safe as can be, to make it towards the end.
Yeah, but they're far from the low ground, right? You see them making sure to elevate as the game moves up and down some of these hills here, staying on those higher layers. Janice and Reason getting stuck beneath, and that might catch them out. You see Reason such low HP now, and Janice doesn't really have many materials to work with, just scrambling around, looking anywhere you can. That's what happens when you get caught out. Rob and Axe Force were looking strong on height at one point, but very much now praying that this pullback will keep them alive in the game.
Trying to play defensive, and as he tries to hold the wall, gets stolen away, gets taken down, and they're out. But the new high ground team, Thomas and Maldabuka, it was about time. Contested out the racetrack. 2 eliminations up into this point. An under-the-radar style of game, and this is a team you don't want to let fly under the radar, because they not only stole away high ground, they're making sure to solidify it. They're making sure to make sure that's not able to be knocked down easily.
Yeah, connecting on all fronts. Need to make sure they now just continue to watch those flanks, figure out who the threat is. But for the most part, things are looking good for them at this stage. Mustache with a big shot. That's wonderful. Now going to regroup with Hide on Bush. That's what he needs to do. He needs to help him get out of that box. It's such a tough spot to be in, with those players looking right at his face. But he will get out. But for how much longer? There's so many players here, scuffed in the back of the zone. They need to make some sort of play to get out of here. Up and over, possibly? No. With Stash and Hide on Bush taken out.
Yeah, he was just had to go forward whichever way he was pushed. Ran out of options and time, but Snazy and Podesai, a different story. Still 6 eliminations. They haven't picked up any more since the last time we saw them, but they're continuing the front side of the zone, the save spot, but Malabuka and Thomas reinforcing yet again, making sure no one can break him down, and this is their chance with a reinforced high ground. They set their eyes down and they're focused to the low ground to try to pressure any team there, force them into each other's box, even slaps towards the outside of zone. Teamwork making the dream work. Malabuka keeping the Thomas alive.
Yeah, Thomas saw something in the zone and went deep in the zone to get it, so it must be worth it. Must be the win condition for them. And we'll see the rest of this game play out in their favor. Snazy and Podesai, they've been making plays, and they're trying to make some more, pushing their way through. They don't have many builds to protect themselves, so it's going to be about using these shotguns now to find some sort of a refresh. And it doesn't look like it's going to come. Podesai forced Snazy, forced to drop down, and even though he did so spectacularly there, can't connect with a finish.
They got the double pump with the Havoc and the Mammoth to take him down. Seti and Cam, he was set up until this point, a slow and quiet game. But Malabuka and Thomas, they were contested for a moment, but it all gets crumbling down. Into the top 3 we go. Blaha and Mixon, 1 goes down. Now it's all up to Mixon. 4 eliminations. He doesn't have enough to win the heal off. He can only stagger himself here for a few seconds before he has to go right back to the front side of zone. Players keep dropping. Malabuka and Thomas still holding on to the high ground and holding it on convincingly to take the game.
Malabuka and Thomas, one of the premier names in the EU region. A duo full of star players who have yet to win on the biggest stage, but moving in the right direction here in week number 2. They pick up the first game, and they do it in spectacular fashion, up on height, soaring through the skies. And a nicely done win from this team, Jacob.
Yeah, and it's almost like deja vu all over again from last season. Contested at the racetrack and boasted the highest placement of any contested team. Game number 1 contested, and it was no worries for both Thomas and Malabuka. They set their tournament day off right with a huge victory and a big lead for them over the rest of everybody else.
Look, we always say when you're contested, you've got to make your games count. Right? You don't know how many you're going to get. Anything can happen on spawn, especially at such a 50-50 spot like racetrack. But they make that game count. They win things big, and they'll look to go back in and do things again. A really nice start to the day. We're going to send it to Zeke and the analysts to break it all down.
Thank you so much, Jacob PR and 11-2K. A huge victory royale. Malabuka and Thomas HD start with a bang. 7 eliminations. And I gotta say, they just played this so well, so expertly, so methodical, right? I love that Jacob called out the splashes into the zone. Like, there's just so many little things that led to this duo getting themselves the victory royale. So well fought, Vivid.
Yeah, a lot of things like you mentioned. Jacob was pointing a lot of them out, but there was one big thing that actually happened to lead them to that victory royale, and it's going to be X-Force and Roban actually getting chopped out, and Thomas HD and Malabuka just paying full attention to what's going on the higher ground. They come out on top of the rest of the lobby, and from there it was smooth sailing, and this is a big victory royale for them here in week number 2 because, you know, last week in week number 1, their best finish was 8th.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it also starts just from how that early game panned out for them, because right from the get-go, being contested at a draw spot that they're so familiar with, they did an excellent job, I think, at acquiring some early Storm Surge damage, but was definitely also very impressed by how they chose to play height, making sure to connect on many different fronts. That way, they didn't necessarily have to be as afraid of getting chopped out as what we saw happening to X-Force, Robin, and even with Snazy and Podesai. I think they made a pretty excellent attempt at trying to overtake height at one point. They were doing a nice job, I think, of tarping directly beneath that ultimate high ground layer in second height position, but just weren't able to actually overthrow Malabuka and Thomas HD up there.
And this is what I was asking for, right? Hey, we can't just let high ground continue to dominate. We have to make plays. And for Malabuka and Thomas, they decided it's our high ground now. Look at me. Good stuff from the duo. I do want to take a look at the standings and kind of see how things are going. Remember, this is still just game 1. It's fine. This is the feeler game, and then we have 5 more after this to really cement our placements and try and put points on our series point leaderboard. But I want to see what duos are maybe not quite in the spotlight quite yet, but are right behind this duo. Remember that Victory Royale means big points, right? So currently they do hold that #1 spot. Someone like Sind and Irizumi, though, look right below. The amount of eliminations, right? Really making up that deficit. I'm surprised.
Yeah, I mean, 8 eliminations, that is going to be huge coming out of game #1. We also saw Blacha and Mixon towards that end game right there. Going to be putting themselves in 3rd place, so it's good to see them. And of course, our consistency kings, Seti and Cammy, didn't really even see them in that end game, but they always seem to find themselves up in that top 5.
Yeah, they popped up very briefly when they were trying to control a little bit more of that mid-ground secondary height. Like Levin mentioned on the cast, there was a lot of hilly terrain that these teams were essentially trying to tarp through. So it was important, I think, for teams to kind of acknowledge that fact. And Seti Cammy, I mean, they are pioneers when it comes to map knowledge. We've seen how well they're able to utilize even just the map essentials that are near their initial drop spot. So the fact that they were in a late game or in an end game is really no surprise.
I'm surprised for me, I guess, that typically EU game 1 of most weeks is crazy, right? It's explosive. We see 1 or 2 duos which have double-digit eliminations. But so far it seems more even across the board. And I feel like, Vivid, that's a lot more pressure and there's a lot more at stake for these duos, right?
Yeah, I mean, game #1 here was actually very, very aggressive in the early game. I mean, we pretty much we were towards the 60 player count very, very quickly that game. And as a result, we had so many duos alive actually as that 12th zone was closing in. And that's just simply the result of a lot of these teams had a lot of their Storm Surge. They didn't really have to fight for a lot of it because so many players had already went down in that early game. So Storm Surge wasn't the biggest factor during that game, which means that a lot of these teams still had so many heals and resources going into the end game, which left us with a lot of chaos.
But it almost makes you wonder if it's going to be a reoccurring thing because, for example, that initial box fight that we saw early on with several different teams, it was Tripper and Revsguard. We see Vico and Pink, and a lot of these duos essentially being forced into having to play as a solo situation. That early on into a match is difficult to actually work your way through with the rotations, especially in a no mobility meta. So almost curious to see if maybe some of these teams are going to decide to maybe play a little bit more reserved to at least make it through that initial landing spot.
Yeah, you talk about reserve. I immediately think Seti and Cammy, right? We didn't get to see too much of them. As you mentioned, they popped up for a moment. But I do worry that this is the low ground duo. And if they just keep doing what we know for them to do, they're suddenly just going to be at the top of that leaderboard, right? Just through consistency, just slowing down, saying, look, there's chaos. That's where we thrive. Let's just do what we need to do to get the win.
Yeah, and they honestly weren't really forced to make a play until that final zone. And because there were so many players alive there, did net them a 5th place. But you would imagine usually at that point in the game, it'd be a top 3 or something like that. Nonetheless, still a great game out of them.
There's just so many goodies, though, as well, kind of being littered all throughout that ultimate low ground. And so it's kind of interesting to see which teams are even choosing to make the compromise of forfeiting some of those secondary height positions that they've been able to establish. But if the sacrifice is worth dropping just to find materials, just to find some extra heals, because we have seen a couple of instances, especially from Week 1 finals, where a slight heal off did actually make the difference between 1st and 2nd place. But at least here in game #1, that definitely was not the result.
Yeah, no one's wanted to take it there, right? They're like, hey, let's just lock up the game. Let's hit these points. I want series points, leaderboard points. I get it. And you know what? I want to see more action, of course, here from the FNCS. 5 more games before we call it a wrap for today. So let's just jump back into all of the action. 11-2K, Jacob PR, over to you.
Jumping into the action is what we shall do momentarily, but that game number big, and I'm going to be looking at Thomas and Malabuga throughout the day to see how they replicate and their success of a contested racetrack.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking insane mistake per se to contest these guys. Very dominant off spawn. And of course, yeah, after the fact, right, how do their games look? I think we've seen them at times in the mid game look a bit scattered, not put themselves in the best positions to thrive in end game. Of course, that wasn't the case here in game 1, and I hope that's not the case for them moving forward.
Yeah, and you even saw show them, they're laughing, their new drop spot, and they third party a couple of teams thanks to it. This game, I don't think they actually pulled the vault, though. So we'll see how things change around in this next game if they get the luck of that vault on their side, because I feel like that will be a huge game changer for them and their momentum going into the next one.
Yeah, 100%. I think everyone's going to keep their eye on those objectives. We know how valuable they are. And I think there's been many of examples, maybe not here on this region, but in other ones where teams are definitely finding that spy area incredibly fruitful.
Yep, luckily for us, we get to check out that Spire area and everything else because game number 2 starts now.
Se deja parado a ella, no a mí. What the fuck? No bailéis, no bailéis. Para de bailar. Por favor, para de bailar, tío. Macho, ¿por qué se te ha parado, tío? El pin lo tengo a 1100 de pin, bro. Mi 100 de pin. Pues bueno. Misión de Bean. Vamos a ver. Segundo los comentarios, no comento. Espera.